Yeah, and so what do you think that, let me run some hypotheses about online behavior by you, and you tell me what you think. I've read tens of thousands of comments on YouTube and on Twitter and so forth, and tried to, many of which I find almost unbearably infuriating, which is a very interesting reaction. I don't think it's unique to me. And the reaction I have often is something like, when an anonymous troll posts something particularly caustic, I think, if you dared say anything like that to me, to my face, even once, there would be so much trouble surrounding you immediately that you can hardly imagine it. But online, there is this social distancing phenomenon that's well known to social psychologists and personality psychologists, that even if you're in your car and thereby sheltered, let's say, from immediate interpersonal feedback, you're much more likely to act in a self-centered and self-aggrandizing manner because you miss that immediate feedback. And there's absolutely no consequence whatsoever to behaving in a narcissistic and self-centered manner online, as far as I can tell. And then that tends to promote, especially for people who are rather disinhibited to begin with, that promotes a kind of self-aggrandizing narcissism that would be absolutely unthinkable in real life. And then you wonder, well, if that's happening all the time online, how much of that becomes a habitual mode of thought? Well, and especially you'd think it would free people who are prone to have those proclivities to do that as well. And I also think that that's more true of people who harbor a fair bit of resentment and who are relatively cowardly. Because if they're resentful, well, then they're going to be looking for the opportunity to use derision in particular. Like I've noticed on YouTube, the markers for pathological behavior seem to me to be quite clear. The first marker is an anonymous account. And I think those are appalling. The social media companies should have know your customer laws like banks do, and they should put the damn anonymous trolls in their own pit of hell, and shouldn't be mixed in with the real people. And then often the worst anonymous accounts have a demonic sounding name. And so there's something about the name that is derisive or often literally demonic. They pick some moniker that's appalling in the most fundamental metaphoric way. And then they tend to use derisive nicknames and acronyms like Laugh Out Loud or LMFAO or WTF. There's this casual use of derision and contempt. There's a great study done, I don't remember who did it, unfortunately, looking at predictors of marital breakup as a consequence of interpersonal interaction between the pairs of a couple. And the best predictor of imminent marital breakup was eye rolling. So the manifestation of contempt. What's that?
John Gottman.
Yeah, that's right. Gottman. Yeah, yeah. And so it's that use of contempt in particular, and I read Hitler's Table Talk. And that's a collection of his spontaneous speeches at meal times aggregated by his secretarial staff over about 4 years. And I was looking at descriptive term usage, trying to understand his thought processes. And it's pretty damn obvious that Hitler wasn't afraid of the Jews or the other people that he conducted genocide against. His fundamental emotional attitude towards such people was derisive contempt and disgust. There's something particularly toxic about disgust and contempt. And there's something about online commentary in particular that really brings that forward. And then you have the other problem, I would say, too, which is that in some sense, the online world, and this is the world that the IGN kids are immersed in, it's a faux celebrity world, right? Because everyone online, in some sense, is a celebrity of different proportions. They have their followers, they have their fans, let's say, and then the whole enterprise seems to facilitate image management. I know I think it's TikTok, there are real-time facial feature adjustment filters so that you can girls use them more than boys for obvious reasons. You can make your lips plumper and redder, you can make your eyes bigger, you can anime yourself, you can cutify yourself, to coin a terrible term, and you can do that in real time. And all of much of the reinforcement pressure seems to be directed towards attention seeking. And then that combined with the fact that there are almost no consequences for misbehavior seems to produce a pretty, first of all, a toxic social environment, but also one that doesn't follow the same rules as actual face-to-face contact, which I think is the bigger danger.
Yeah, and I think the online world has followed an interesting trajectory, when it comes to attention seeking and narcissism and so on. So the one constant, you're right, the trolls, the ones who are the worst offenders, yeah. Sociopaths, narcissists, clearly, they've shown that in research. But for everybody else, I think early on, social media was something that pulled for that attention seeking, and you got that narcissism there of, look at me, I'm on MySpace and I have this many followers and here's all of my pictures and so on. But then when social media became more mandatory, which is really what it became for iGen around the early 2010s, I mean, when, almost 80%, 85% or so of high school students are doing that every single day on social media, then, and everybody's participating, well, not everybody can get attention. So then it becomes this competition. So I think at that point became less about narcissism for most people and more about not measuring up. And that's right. And that's when you start to get, I have to use these enhancement filters because I don't look as good as everybody else online. And I must be, unattractive because I don't have as many likes and followers as I want to have. And then all of the other things of I'm not interacting with someone face to face. I'm not getting the same emotional connection, and that people are automatically more negative and hostile. I mean, there's so many things going on in that online interaction. Especially once it became mandatory, that pulled not even really for narcissism, but more for anxiety and depression.
Right. So maybe that's part of the reason that you've been picking up these and indicating these increases in mental health symptoms among young people. Well, the other thing I'm wondering about too, I've thought about this to a great degree, is that I studied antisocial behavior in boys and girls. And boys, they're pretty much straightforward juvenile delinquents when they're antisocial. They kick and fight and steal and break rules. And it's a lot of externalizing behavior, right? A lot of acting out. But girls who are antisocial, they use reputation destruction and innuendo and gossip and backbiting, and they can be unbelievably good at it. And everyone knows that. I mean, Mean Girls, that famous movie, was about precisely that. And the thing about social media one of the things about it that's quite interesting and disturbing is that female type antisocial behavior scales brilliantly online. Because it can be done behind the scenes, it can be done anonymously, it can be done with that derisive contempt, let's say. And the consequences are vanishingly small. And so I can imagine that teenage girls who are often subject to bullying by other girls are now subject to bullying in a way that's much more subtle and much more devious and much more continuous, because that's the other thing that happens to young people now is, can you imagine being a teenager where nothing you ever did would be forgotten?
Right. And it's 24/7. It's always with you, because that's the way they communicate with their friends. That is their lifeline to the world. And so it used to be, maybe you got bullied at school, you could come home and get away from it. And now there's no escape. And it is particularly toxic for girls. I mean, think about Instagram. Instagram at base is a platform where primarily girls and young women post pictures of themselves and ask other people to comment.
Jesus, brutal.
Right? It absolutely is brutal. And popularity becomes a number, likes and followers, and cyberbullying, all the things that we're talking about, it is a toxic soup.